Welcome to our webinar. Thank you for your interest in the information we will share today about visualizing retirement. My name is Mike Hulme. I'm a managing partner and advisor at Financial Resource Advisors. Financial Resource Advisors is an independent, team-based advisory firm, and we are fiduciaries, which essentially means that we sit on the same side of the table as our clients. We guide our clients to achieve their financial objectives and help them reach their retirement goals. Our speaker today is Patrick Delaney. Patrick is a vice president with T. Rowe Price, and he's been in the financial services industry for over 20 years, all of that time with T. Rowe Price. In a prior role, Patrick served as a retirement insights leader and a national conference speaker. He lives in Maryland, just north of Baltimore, and for fun and relaxation, Patrick enjoys hiking, playing tennis, writing, and traveling. Patrick, we are looking forward to the insights you're going to share today about visualizing retirement, particularly those non-financial aspects of retirement. So the microphone's all yours.
Thank you very much, Mike, and good day to everybody, wherever you may be in space and time. Thank you for spending a few minutes with us to think about developing your vision around retirement and why we think this topic is so important. And I hope this is different than any other presentation or webinar that you've ever attended with respect to how you think about planning for retirement. It's meant to be different, and hopefully it kind of opens up a new world when you think about retirement planning. But I want you all to go through an exercise with me for a second here, and since we're talking about visualizing your own retirement, go through an exercise. I want you to take 10 or 20 seconds and imagine your own retirement. I'll pause and just think about the first few thoughts or phrases that come into your own mind. And I'm hoping some of the things that pop up on the screen here are some of the things that you thought about. Maybe it was travel. Maybe it was sleeping late, although I will in full admittance say that you do not need to be in retirement in order to enjoy an occasional sleeping in day. Could be the G&G, as I like to call it, the kids, the grandkids in golf. It could also be volunteering. Could be hobbies. But hopefully nobody thinks about or thought about when you imagined your own retirement, the next thing that pops up on the screen. And you think about all of the things that are currently on there, what they have in common, what you're going to do, where you're going to do it, who you're going to spend your time with. I mean, all of these things, if you think about it, are non-financial in nature. I mean, hopefully nobody thinks about Social Security rules or what the tax implications might be of leaving a Roth IRA to a non-spousal beneficiary. You think about all of these things when you envision your own retirement. I mean, money usually isn't one of the first things that come into the picture there. And yet, when we think about retirement planning, oftentimes we think about how much we're saving, what type of investments they are. And I want to give you another story to help illuminate this. An Aesop's fable, if you will, of the retirement industry. There was a very wealthy, smart, successful American investment banker, and he's on the Italian leg of a European vacation. And one morning he gets up really early, the rest of his family's sleeping, and he wanders down to the docks, the piers of this small coastal Italian fishing village. And he's having his coffee out there, and through the morning mist, there's this one little boat with one fisherman pulls up right next to him on the dock. But in the back of the boat are several really nice-looking European Mediterranean bass. And the American looks down and compliments the Italian on the quality of his fish, and he says, "How long did it take you to catch those?" And the Italian says, "It was only a little while." The American said, "Well, what do you do with the rest of your time?" And he said, "Well, I sleep late, I fish a little, I take afternoon naps with my wife, I play with my kids, and every evening I stroll into the town over there, I sip wine and play guitar with my friends. It's not a bad gig." And he says, "Well, why don't you stay out and catch more fish?" He says, "Well, this is all my family and I need." The American says, "Listen, I think I can help you a second. I'm a very wealthy, successful American investment banker. I've got a Harvard MBA, and I know with the quality of those fish, you could probably buy a bigger boat if you stayed out longer and caught more. With the quality of the fish from the bigger boat, you could buy several boats, and eventually you'd own your own fleet. And at that point, you wouldn't have to sell your catch to the middleman. You could open your own processor, eventually open your own cannery. And at that point, you'd have control of everything, the product, the processing and the distribution. Now, that may necessitate you move away from this small coastal Italian fishing village, even to Rome or London or even New York, where you'd have to run your expanding enterprise. And the Italian laughs back at him and says, yeah, and how long is all that going to take? The American says, what are you, about 50 years old? You give me 15 years and I can make that work for you. And the Italian says, 15 years? And then what? The American said, that's the best part. See, when the time is right, you announce the IPO, you sell your company stock to the public, and you make millions, if not tens of millions. And at this, the Italian's eyes lit up. He said, millions. And then what? The American said, then you retire. You move to a small coastal fishing village in Italy where you sleep late, you fish a little, take afternoon naps with your wife, play with your kids, and every evening you stroll into the town over there where you sip wine and play guitar with your friends. Now, you see the irony in that story, and the two different perspectives on the way that people are living out or envisioning their retirement. We traditionally think about retirement planning through the lens of the American. You've got to make the money. That comes first, and the assets are going to drive everything else. But the Italian had it reverse engineered. He knew what he wanted to do, knew how he wanted to spend his time, who he wanted to spend his time with, and the money that he got from the fish that he sold was merely a mechanism to execute the tactics of the strategy. So how often do we think about how much we have to save? How much do we have to save for retirement? How much are you saving? If you don't even know a lot of time what you're saving for. And that's what Visualize Retirement in this exercise is designed to do, to help you figure out what you're saving for, so then you can marry the financial plan to execute the tactics of that vision, of that strategy. And you think about retirement here, F. Scott Fitzgerald, the famous author, said, the test of a first-rate intelligence is the ability to hold two opposing ideas in your mind at the same time and still retain the ability to function. Now, you think about retirement is one of those things where people are very aspirational. They get excited about it. They're looking forward to it. And yet, at the same time, it's something that can be concerning. It can be stress and anxiety-inducing. And you say, well, how can that be? You're either looking forward to something or you're not looking forward to it. But you don't have to look far. And many of you may have gone through a recent life experience or life event where something similar has happened. Whether you're getting a new job or you're getting married or having children or buying a home, all of these things, you have these two sometimes conflicting ideas in your head where you could be excited about it, could be adventurous, could be aspirational, but at the same time, there could be concerns or anxiety or stress around it. And usually, that stress and anxiety is related to the directly corresponding to the amount of preparation or thought that you've put into something in advance. And so certainly, when it comes to your retirement, we want to over-index. We want to help you enjoy the excitement about it, the aspirational nature of looking forward to retirement, and try to reduce the anxiety and stress. And if you think about these numbers, and I'm going to show you on the screen here, these are pre-retirees, so people north of age 50. You think about all of the different financial help or guidance or advice that they have been exposed to and can take advantage of throughout the course of their lives or careers, be it through your human resources department, be it through folks like financial resource advisors. If you're working with an advisor or financial professional, you have at your fingertips a lot of different financial education and help. And so when people get to pre-retiree age, it stands to reason that 74% of them said, by this point in my life, I've done a pretty good job to prepare financially for the next phase, for retirement. The problem is that when you ask the same age cohort, only 35% have said, I've done a good job preparing emotionally, psychologically, for everything else other than the money. I've got more money than I need maybe, but you know what? I don't really have a plan. And that's what we're here today to help, is bridge the gap between these two figures. Because in the end, this is the bottom of the title of this says it all. Non-financial considerations are the ones that really influence your retirement decisions. If you look at these main considerations influencing when people want to retire, All right, it's reaching a certain age, wanting to stop working, feeling ready to retire. You see that money doesn't come into the picture until the very bottom of the screen, and sometimes that can be driven around being eligible for Social Security, being eligible for Medicare. So age 62, 65 come into play there. But really, non-financial considerations drive retirement investment decisions. And if do me a favor, as one point of homework, Google what makes retirees happy, or key drivers of happiness and success in retirement. Money is never near the top of those decisions or that data or research. All of the answers that retirees are asking the experts, the people living it, all of those answers tree up to three pillars. It's lifestyle, which is kind of the who, what, where, what am I doing on a day in, day out basis, who am I doing it with? It's healthcare, and it's meaning, it's having purpose, it's having identity in retirement. And so that's what we're here today to help you work through. And those are key components in us helping you develop the vision over the next couple minutes. All right. And when you develop a vision, you can create clarity around what you're saving for. And again, it establishes a framework around how much you may need, the type of investments that you might want to put that money in. And then you start to work with others who are a part of that vision. People who are a part of your vision, you want to loop them in on it. And then you certainly want to bring in the financial professionals to help make that vision a reality. All right. Now,
Patrick?
here's what we're going to do. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Mike.
Yes, I was just going to comment as we were preparing for this and I was getting familiar with it. It struck me about that point with clarity that many people, I think, first think of retirement as not doing something, meaning not going to work typically. And secondly, likely dream of some of those maybe I'll say a little bit more exotic things like going on some big trips and things like that, but really haven't sat down to think specifically about day in and day out, what are those specific things that are going to make me happy like you described?
Yeah, 100%. And I have, in giving this presentation and talking with retirees all around the country, some of them will lay out a calendar. They'll have a daily calendar, a weekly calendar, or a planner, and they'll lay it out and they'll say, okay, put in all of the golf, put in all of the vacations, put in all the walks on the beach, put in all the road trips, and you're still going to have 80 to 90% of your year that you need to fill up. And so, yes, we want to be aspirational, but when we work through some of these W's that you see up on the screen here, a lot of times your success and happiness in retirement is not driven by the vacations, it's driven by the mundane, having something to do on the day-to-day basis and having meaning and intention behind that. And the more you can help bring that, develop that vision and crystallize it, I think the happier you're going to be, or at least the happier that we've seen retirees. And in talking with folks around the country about this, they'll say it time and time again, it's being able to fill the calendar up, not with the vacations and the golf, but in the day-to-day. And having a good reason, the last W on here all the way to the right you see is why. And I don't want to get into it too much and ruin it, but why is not why am I retiring? It's why am I getting out of bed every morning?
It's a great way.
And that's a much bigger question to answer. You think it doesn't matter as much now, but I tell you, retirees will tell you it is one of the most important things they need to figure out in order to be happy in retirement. So that's a great point. So I hearken back to my high school journalism days here, Mike, and going through these 5 W's. They say you've got to cram the 5 W's into the top paragraph of a news story, which is one we wrote for my high school. But here's what we're going to do. We're going to walk through these 5 W's of your retirement vision. And there's 2 things that I'm going to ask you to do, and hopefully that we've incorporated into this exercise that are going to make this easier for you. Number 1 is the acknowledgement that retirement timeframes can be 25 plus years. Asking you who you're going to spend your time with or what you're going to be doing over a 25-year time frame would be similar to me asking my 14-year-old daughter what she's going to be doing for the next 25 years of her life, or a 25-year-old, hey, give me the next 25 years of your career. They're going to say, Dad, Patrick, you're off the reservation again. You're crazy. I can't give you the next 25 years, but I can probably give you the next 5 to 7. And so when we work through these W's in this exercise, I want you to think about that. Keep that time frame in mind. Not what are you going to be doing for your entire retirement, but what are you going to be doing for that first 5 to 7 years after the transition? The so-called retirement experts sometimes break retirement down into 3 phases. They call it the go-go, the slow-go, and the no-go. Let's focus just on the go-go years of your retirement. The other thing that we're going to do when we walk through these exercises, we're going to incorporate a key concept of adult learning theory. So if you think of children, they show up to a classroom and they learn the best because they're young and they don't know any better, so they're taught information and they regurgitate it in the form of a paper or a project or a test. But adults, when we come to the table to learn, we've got all this life experience that gets in the way, and so we don't take too kindly to people talking to us or at us. So what I'm going to do in a lot of the first question of these sections is not ask you what's your retirement going to look like, but it's going to take stock and inventory of what your life looks like today. Once we start to build in that current life experience and where you are in life, it becomes much easier for each of us to then project how that might have to change after the initial transition to retirement takes effect. So we're going to incorporate your life experience, which hopefully this helps. The other thing we're going to do is we're going to look 5 to 7 years after your retirement takes place, not 25 to 35 years. Hopefully that makes it a little bit easier for you. All right, here's what we're going to do. We're going to start with the who. We're going to give you a little bit of data as to why this is important. And what the scientists have found is that social interaction, people are good for your health. Not necessarily in the case of my stepdad, who actually just picked me up from the car repair shop this morning on a trip back from Nova Scotia, where he was up there in a very sparsely populated place, hiking and backpacking by himself. But generally, people are good for other people, and social networks are very good for people in terms of their cognitive ability and dementia, and also there's a strong correlation between health and social interaction. And so what I'm going to ask you to do here is I'm going to ask you to first stack rank who you spend your time with today. And if you bear with me one moment here, I'm going to toggle back to a workbook. I believe Mike and his team at FRA have these workbooks, and you can have an electronic version available that you see on the screen here. If you do have this workbook available, there is a version where you can actually go through each of these exercises as I walk through it in the PowerPoint, and you can stack rank things. This is a fillable PDF where you can go through it, but you do not need the workbook in order to go through these exercises. Take out a scrap piece of paper, but if you do have this workbook available, and certainly something that Mike and the folks at FRA can make available to you after this presentation, but I just wanted to acknowledge there is a workbook that follows the chronology of this presentation. And if you have it available, it's certainly helpful to go through as I work through each of the W's. So let me pause again, make sure we're back on task here. And with the who, we're going to say, let's take a look at your social network. Who do you spend the most time with today? Not who you should be spending your time with. That's a slight nod for me to call my own parents, but it's who you do spend your time with today. And now let's take a look at how that is going to change after the initial transition to retirement takes effect. And remember, and I'm going to serve as a reminder in several of these, if your definition of retirement is a complete cessation or a severe cutback in your hours or work, you're going to find that you've got a big gap to fill in your social network. And so this is a valuable exercise just for you to start to think through what that looks like, how big of a gap it might be, and you can start to take some action items to make sure that there's not a huge drop-off in your social interaction. Now, the 3 pillars of happiness and success in retirement were lifestyle, healthcare, and meaning. Now, healthcare is kind of a tough subject because nobody wants to envision a day where they're rapidly or gradually declining in physical or mental health, but it's extremely important when you talk to pre-retirees and retirees. So we're going to think about it in a little bit more of a positive or aspirational aspect. And the next question is one of those. So you think about a support or caregiving network, okay? And there's 2 aspects to this. There is, if you need support and care, who do you want on your support team? And just as important, what role may you have to play on the care support team of a friend or relative? All right, and you think about it in this aspect, kind of we're all in it for each other, but also, and certainly in terms of if you or someone you know is playing the role of primary caregiver to a friend or relative, you know it has a direct impact on your lifestyle. So lifestyle and healthcare very intertwined here. We want to think of healthcare in a more positive aspect, and we've got another question that comes in here, which will address that in a moment. But think about these two questions for a moment. Who do you want on your care support team, and what role may you have to play on the care support team of somebody else? I'll also make a quick nod here, Mike. If any of you need more time to stack rank these or go through each individual question, feel free to pause the recording. I want to go through this to make sure that we get through everything in a certain amount of time and let you get back to your day. But I think the beauty of having this is that you can also pause this and take as much time as you need working through each of the W's. All right? So that was the who section. And let's move on to the what, which is, we talked about it, because what do you do with your day? And when you ask workers what their visions for retirement include, here are their top answers. I mean, this is all around lifestyle, wanting to travel and spending time with family and friends, pursuing hobby. And yes, the definition of retirement for many folks is changing, and an increasing amount of folks saying work is going to play some role. It might be a supporting role. I might get another job doing something else that I want. It might be a cutback in my hours, but work is going to play a role in some form or fashion in my retirement. So similar to as we did in the first section, we're going to take a look at how you spend your time today and then stack rank those things. And again, those of you working full-time jobs, 40 plus hours a week, that first one, working, is probably going to be at or near the top of that section of your stacked rank list here. But if spending time with family might be another one, caring for pets, engaging in social and fun activities. And now, if you move over to the right-hand side, you think about how you need to restack this list based on that initial transition to retirement, the first 5 to 7 years. And again, traditional definition of retirement is a complete cessation or a severe cutback in work. You've got, just like in your social network, maybe a big gap to fill. If you've got a time allocation of your week, you might have a big gap to fill in the hours of a day that you need to start to find things to bridge that gap. If work was near the top today, and it's going to be closer to the bottom going forward.
Patrick, sorry to interrupt there. It's just, this one really resonated with me and with clients that I work with too, where when we're working full time, that is such a huge part of our identity, where when people ask about ourselves, a lot of times we will start with, I am an educator, I work at a hospital because I'm a nurse, or I work at construction sites. It's such a huge part of our identity that this one struck me as quite significant as well, and that emotional adjustment that one goes through when you're not working full time.
Yeah, and 100%. And again, it's not necessarily all of the rounds of golf or walks on the beach or seashells or whatever it might be, but it's going to be the day-to-day. And actually, that's a great segue. So you think about, here's another question where we start to incorporate healthcare into this. And again, want to think about it in a more positive light. We want to set you up for happiness and success in retirement. And to your point, Mike, when we enter retirement, we don't become new people. I'm not going to be all of a sudden a new person with different friends and new habits and behaviors and routines. Oftentimes, retirement is just a continuation of all of the habits and routines and behaviors, both good and bad, that we have prior to going into retirement. And so when we think about healthcare and we think about being able to live the type of healthy and vibrant retirement lifestyle that you envision for yourself, what are some of the things you can start doing today to make sure that you live that healthy and vibrant retirement lifestyle? You hear it all the time, and it's one of the things that breaks your heart. And they say, listen, I've got all the money in the world, but I'm not healthy enough to do the things that I wanted to do, the things that my wife and I, the things that my kids and I set out and plan for ourselves. And that's one of the hardest things to hear, because you go, again, the financial aspects are taken care of, and yet there was all of these other non-financial considerations that people forgot to think about in order to be able to execute and live out the strategy that you set forth. And so really important, but what can you start doing today to make sure that you can live that type of healthy and vibrant retirement lifestyle that you want for yourself? So think about a couple things here, and certainly pause the recording if you need more time, but whether it's exercise, managing your weight, a lot of this is preventative care. I certainly don't overlook the mental exercises or adopting a positive mindset. I think self-care is extremely important. I do a lot of presentations on financial wellness, and I say, listen, financial wellness has as many non-financial benefits to your stress, to your anxiety, to your outlook on life as it does your checkbook or your checking account or your wallet. So certainly don't overlook the mental health aspect of things that you can do in order to live that vibrant retirement lifestyle that you want to. All right, we're going to move on here in the interest of time, and we're going to move on to the when. I'm sorry, the where. And the question that I love is, why do you live where you do today? So workers, people in working careers, cite these as their top criteria when they think about where they're going in retirement. But if you think about where you live today and why you do, I think of my entire working career. I live in and around the Baltimore area. The decision of me to buy houses, and I bought 3 over the past 20 years, was proximity to BWI, so I could get to and from the airport to see clients. When I moved out of the city and started a family, it was schools, but it was also figuring out the rush hour traffic patterns around the Baltimore Beltway so I could get to and from the office. And so when you retire, the world becomes your oyster. I mean, you all of a sudden, you have all of these really cool considerations to think about as to why you live where you do today versus what's going to drive where you live in retirement. And all of these other things like cost of living or crime or proximity to work, low maintenance, or even, a peaceful, beautiful location. Yes, that was somewhere in the background. I mean, I certainly didn't want to live, on a 2-lane highway because I've got small kids over the past decade, but it wasn't the number one reason driving where I bought my house. And I'll give you an example. What they found was for what they call the quote unquote senior migration rate, they found that only about 6.5 to 7.5% of retirees moved. But where they were moving was not the coasts or the Florida per se or Arizona. It was in towns that had a huge college presence. So you think of Tuscaloosa, Alabama. You think of Athens, Georgia. You think of State College, Pennsylvania, where these big colleges were. And when we dug into that, we looked at the research. It was big university systems and kind of geographies have a lot of things that are really attractive to retired folks. They typically have good hiking, biking, walking trails. They have ample opportunities to volunteer. Big college towns, big college campuses usually host a lot of cultural exhibits, art exhibits, political speeches, rallies, things like that. They usually have access to Division I sports at a fraction of the cost of professional sports, or oftentimes they're free. They're usually associated and tied to really good university healthcare systems. And so all of a sudden you start to think about all of these things that come into play here, which I think really make the where part of this a really fun exercise to go through. So think about, again, pause this if you need to. Why do you live where you do today? And think about now the world becomes your oyster in retirement. Think of all of these other considerations or factors that you could prioritize when work or traffic patterns or access to transportation all of a sudden can be removed from that equation. All right, we're going to move on to the when. Well, we're getting near the home stretch here, and the when isn't. We're not going to overcomplicate this. We'll give you some examples of people and their transitions into retirement and when they were going to do it. Now, if you look at these different bar graphs and the answers up here, stop working all at once is only 29% of folks. So for the other, 71%? I'm doing my math there correctly, Mike. But for the other answer, we'll say the rest of the answers on the right-hand side of this chart, all of them said work is either going to be gradually reduced or play some sort of role. Continue to work part-time, gradually reduce hours, continue to work part-time in the same occupation, cycle between periods of working and not working. So think about your transition and is work going to play a role or is it not? And then we're going to answer these two questions. And what are the factors influencing the time that you retire? All right. Is it a certain age? Is it, hey, I'm personally ready to do other things like we saw at the beginning? It could be, unfortunately, a lot of times you hear, well, I want to keep working, but health issues, either mine or others. Again, this is where that care support network and team comes into play. What do you think is going to drive factors influencing the timing of your retirement? And then number 7 here, do you have an idea of when that is going to be? And so what I would say, that first checkbox under number 7, maybe even putting in a range there of 3 to 5 years would be helpful than trying to pinpoint it at a certain age. But again, a valuable exercise just to start to think about what might drive the when around your retirement. A lot of people simply tie it to age 62 or 65 because of Social Security or Medicare. But again, really, there are a lot of other forces at play here that a lot of folks just really haven't taken the time to think about. And hopefully that's been a valuable portion of this at a base level is, I've never really thought about several things that go into these 5 W's. But if you've got kind of an idea for 6 and 7 here, let's take you into the home stretch, and we'll talk about my favorite, is the why. And let's give you a little science and data behind purpose and identity and meaning and fulfillment and why that's so important. Because, believe it or not, people with greater purpose tend to remain free of Alzheimer's, are less likely to develop disabilities or die young. I mean, we're talking life expectancy there, but less likely to develop even mild cognitive impairment. Okay? And so let me ask you, what gives you meaning and fulfillment today? This is something that a lot of folks probably have never even thought about. Why are you getting out of bed today? That's the why behind this last one. And for many folks, it is going to be success in my job. I mean, when you dedicate 30 to 40 years of your adult life to whatever your vocation or craft might be, whether you maybe you want to admit it or not, a lot of your why comes from your career or your role. And this is where it really hit home for me. And you kind of cast this one aside as maybe a little too emotional, a little too touchy-feely. This really doesn't have that much of an impact on my psyche or my psychological state. But when we were looking at this, I happened to log into Sports Illustrated. I'm a huge sports fan, big Sports Illustrated fan. And I read one morning there was an open retirement letter from Lindsey Vonn, who's arguably the greatest female skier the planet has ever seen. It was an open retirement letter of Lindsey Vonn to all of her fans that she published through Sports Illustrated one day. And so I said, I've got to read this. I can't believe she's retiring. And, I happen to work in the retirement business. Let me see if there's a couple things that I can use here. And it caught me right away that the title of her letter said, How I'm Processing a Life Without Skiing. You think about that for a second. Does that feel positive or negative to you? You've got to process bad news. You process a death in the family, getting laid off from a job, major illness. And that's how she titled her retirement letter. And the first line of that letter said, announcing my retirement has been the single greatest difficult reality I've ever faced in my entire life. Now, mind you, this is coming from somebody who by age 35 has had 2 ACL reconstructions, an MCL dislocation, 4 tibial plateau fractures, a spiral fracture of her humerus bone with a plate and 18 screws, multiple meniscal repairs, multiple concussions, broken fingers, broken ankles, and the recovery from all of that. And yet retirement has been the greatest difficult reality she has ever faced in her life. Now, again, you don't have to have won 82 World Cup races or been the greatest of anything in the world in order to have those same feelings, in order to have that same feeling of lost identity, to not have a good reason for getting out of bed every morning. I mean, she goes on to ask, rhetorically, who am I and what am I without skiing? But, if you've been a teacher or a doctor, a lawyer, you name it, a firefighter for 35 years, 40 years, all of a sudden you get up and you're just grandma or granddad or mom or dad, all of a sudden you've got this big gap to fill, just like we talked about with the social network, just like we talked about in your weekly calendar. You've got a big emotional and psychological gap to fill that you maybe never even gave credit that it existed before. And so thinking about your why is an extremely important aspect to being happy and successful and fulfilled in retirement. So Lindsay Vaughn aside, so think about what gives you fulfillment and meaning and purpose today. Think about how that may change or need to change and the action items that you can start to take today in order to bridge that gap in these two columns on here. All right, and then we've got a couple of action items that we want to leave you with here. So we have talked about developing this vision, visualizing your retirement in the context of this initial transition. But whether you are 55 or 65 or 35 now, all right, and you've created a vision, this is already hopefully going to motivate you to make better financial decisions, to bring this vision to reality, to make it real. But now that you've got your starting point for this vision, and anytime you go through a major life event, you get married, you get divorced, you have children, you upsize, you downsize, empty nester, new job, you name it, go back to the vision. Make sure that whatever you just went through in life, the strategy now aligns and still aligns with the vision that you set out. And if not, go through the exercise again and tweak it. And if you want additional workbooks, I know Mike and FRA will have them available, but you don't need the workbook, but go out and take out a piece of paper and go through those 5 W's. Okay, now that I've been through this life event, I need to refine my vision. Number 2 on here, actions to consider. Talk with your spouse and family. We would say anybody who is a part of your vision, spouse, partners, families, friends, you name it, anybody who's a part of your vision, communicate your vision to them. Say, here's what I plan. You're going to be a part of it. I want you to be a part of it. And here's what it looks like. So I think communication is key. And then number 3, certainly you need to make this vision a reality. And so just like the fisherman had the who, what, where's already figured out, the fish that he caught was merely a mechanism to execute on the tactics. Now work with financial professionals to make sure that you're saving, that you're investing appropriately, that you've got the money, the mechanism to execute the tactics of this vision or strategy. And I think that's where Mike and his team at Financial Resource Advisors comes into play here. So with that, Mike, I see you back on screen here. I will stop and pause and certainly turn it back over to you, but I appreciate you having me on, and I certainly appreciate everybody spending a few minutes of their day with us.
Thank you very much, Patrick. The information and perspectives you shared are certainly very insightful. And as Patrick mentioned, we are here for you if you'd like to get a copy of the workbook. So for those viewers that are clients here at Financial Resource Advisors, certainly reach out to your advisor if you'd like to discuss this more with him or her, as well as if you'd like to get a copy of the booklet. For other viewers that are not clients or are employees of employers that we serve as part of their retirement plan, for 401ks, for example, you're also certainly welcome to contact us. I'll go ahead and put here in the recording. Our number is 319-232-6122. Contact us, ask for me if you'd like to get a copy of that booklet, or certainly let us know if you'd like to have a consultation as well. So once again, Patrick, thank you so very much for your time and knowledge and expertise today.
Thank you, Mike. Take care.
Okay, take care. Bye-bye.